Good morning, everyone. I have got 10:30, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kate Lambert. I'm the Director of Education with FCS Financial, and on behalf of the entire cooperative, would like to thank you for joining us today. Lori is the founder of AgHires. Many of you are probably familiar with that organization. AgHires helps recruiting and job advertisers all over the U.S. within the industry. Now, Lori grew up on her family's third generation potato, tomato, and grain farm that covered Michigan and northern Indiana. But when she went into the HR world, she did not go in through the family operation, but actually left the ag industry altogether and went a different route. But during that time period, she was helping her family with their hiring needs and started to recognize that there was a gap in resources available for people and farmers in the ag industry to attract, hire, and retain farm employees. That inspired her to create AgHires. Today, in addition to running AgHires, she works to provide education to both employees hiring and candidates looking for jobs. Lori is the HR coach and writer for DTN Progressive Farmer and enjoys speaking in front of ag students as well as educating them on career paths. With that, Lori, if you don't mind to turn camera on. I've got your screen share up. I am going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And thanks for FCS for having this and holding this presentation today. And I'm really just excited about, obviously passionate about farming, passionate about talent and people. And you think about what is one of the biggest factors of success for almost any business, farms included. It's really your people, your team, your human capital, if you will. And I want you to walk away today with some new perspectives, tips, tricks, best practices on how we're attracting employees to our farm, the hiring process, and also retaining employees. I think of it retaining, and I almost despise that word, and I do use it, but I think of retaining, you're like holding something there. I'd much rather maximize the performance of your team. So we do need to retain them on our team, but even better, how do we maximize the performance of what they're doing for the farm? So if you think about it, when I talk to most of my farm clients, what's their biggest pain point? It's employees. So, how to find them. I'm settling for the ones I have, or I don't know how to motivate. And it always comes back to really this managing of people. So if you think about your equipment, equipment's just easier. I mean, it's a lot easier actually to take care of. But if you think about what you do with your equipment to make sure it's maximizing its performance, you are doing preventative maintenance on your equipment, and you are doing in the moment repairs, and sometimes you're doing an entire overhaul on your equipment. And I think, on farms, we have to kind of maybe improve on that structure of what we're doing with our employees. How are we handling our human capital, and what kind of needs to be done on an ongoing basis, right? What can be done as preventative maintenance, if you will. And then sometimes we need a whole overhaul, maybe on our management practices or how we're interacting with our team, or even who's on the team. So, every one employee versus another, really can increase profitability, reduce costs if you have a top talent on your team. So with that, I won't kind of re-go over what Kate, went through, but we do recruit across the US, and we also have our own job board. The family farm, I'm very familiar with family dynamics. So my brother is the CEO of our farm, and he farms about 10,000 acres. My husband is an ops manager on the farm. My dad is still working probably more than the rest of us still in terms of hours. And so we understand, really, I would say, family dynamics, with that leadership piece. And then also, again, hiring and managing those team members. So let's start off with, where are these candidates, right? I had several clients call me last year, really saying, I can't even find a tractor driver. Like, I can't even find, forget my top talent or my farm leads or field leads. I can't even find someone to operate, equipment. So we've had a shortage. We've been having a shortage. I think I've given several speeches over the past 5 years on the shortage that we're having in ag. So what is driving that? What's going on there? And then how can we combat that, really? I mean, the answer is, how do we solve this problem? So the current job market, I kind of thought, I want to talk a little bit about COVID, but not too much. But, I even thought for myself, with all those layoffs, I thought it would bring in, more people to the market. Maybe we'd have a little bit bigger pool to choose from for that kind of short window. There was like extra, unemployment was extremely high. But if you look at it, did help, right? It helped some of my larger clients, maybe even some of the agribusiness side of things, right, on their corporate side, because there was more talent available to pull in. But if you look at who got laid off, it didn't really help agriculture, right? So you think about hospitality, you think about the food service industry, right, that got kind of wiped out, professional services, all of those don't translate as well over to our agricultural business, military, construction, some other things that would have been a little closer to what we do would have helped. I think we had a few more technicians and mechanics available, with the manufacturing. But if you look at those kind of side hustle candidates, the ones that do like lawn, let's say landscaping work or hardscape work, or pretty much, side remodeling jobs, anyone that's really crafty with their hands and enjoys being outside, they were all busy because everybody was spending money on home improvement. So even those kind of part-time kind of side hustle individuals that we like to sometimes grab, they weren't available as well. So we thought we had a little window. It helped a little bit, but not much. So you look at, well, where's everyone going, right? So we're seeing a lot of switching of jobs outside of ag. So if you see this, we have a lot of people leaving the farming industry and changing to another line of work. Where are they going? This is somewhat accurate. I always like to do a pulse check, but construction's one of them, right? Is a big portion. They're moving over to that construction side or something else, but they're also going to industrial, and transportation and other areas. But if you ask me, I tend to ask people, especially the younger ones, maybe not coming back to the farm or not taking on farm jobs. I've been asking a lot, like, so what's holding you back, maybe? Because they still have a passion for on farm. But what we're doing is, I think we have a perception problem. The perception is that farms don't pay enough, right? Or farms won't offer benefits, or farms won't have the work-life balance. And I'm not saying a 40-hour work week, so we'll get into that in a second. But there's a perception problem, I think, that we have to combat as farms. And so that's one thing. We've got a little bit of a perception issue. But two, we have to kind of sell ourselves a little bit, like, well, why are we a good pick? So we're going to kind of talk about what we do have to offer. And I think a lot of times farms don't quite think about what you do have, which is really strong compared to what the candidate's looking for in today's market. So there's, I think, a few dynamics that need to be tweaked to get those individuals kind of attracted back into agriculture. Today's candidate-driven market. So obviously with the shortage, candidates are a little bit more in the driver's seat, right? We talk about we're short in agriculture. We've been short in agriculture, but it's just not us, right? If you look across, all industries, I watch all these kind of HR stats and surveys, every industry is saying their biggest problem is talented employees. So typically it's always number one, and then it's followed by, employee engagement, motivation, and then work-life balance is kind of usually there at the third. But the challenge is we're short in ag, but we're also short in the other industries. So we're not only fighting kind of within ag for talent, we're fighting the fact that they can go to the industrial roles or, the construction roles or somewhere else. And we're kind of all sharing that same talent pool. So it is tugging on us, which is kind of driving the market. So what do candidates want? Okay, so we could talk all day that there's a shortage, but so what are we gonna do about it? What candidates want? Cultural fit, see impact of your work-life balance. It's the top three. It's been the top three for a couple of years if you look at the surveys out there. But I have to say, when we are interviewing candidates, my firm, we recruit for candidates across the US in agriculture. What is the number one question every candidate asks me is, what's it like to work there? What's the management team like? Have they had a lot of turnover? What's their style like? What's their culture like? What's their work environment like? It is the biggest question asked. People think pay is the biggest question. Pay is a factor, and we need to not be underpaying, but the biggest impact is, what is it like to work there? So if that is the number one question we're getting from candidates, I will flip side that. When we have a new farm client that we're working with on recruiting, we have a big kickoff call, right? We want to learn more about their company in a deep way. And so we'll ask them not only about their history and what this position does and their size, but we will ask them, what is it like working there? Like, kind of, what's your elevator speech? What is it like? How would you describe your culture? That question is the number one struggle question for our farm clients. So there is definitely a disconnect. We have farm clients that don't know how to articulate or haven't quite mapped that out or worked at kind of defining a right culture. And yet the candidate pool, their number one question asked is that question. So if you walk away with just one thing today, I would say that is it. Try to figure out, who do you want to be as an employer? How do we become kind of an employer of choice? And, where are we today and where's that gap? We're still working on it, in our own organization at AgHires. I know my brother works on it. It's kind of a constant focus. So if there is a gap, that's the one thing, is how do we get there? How do we answer that question of improving our culture? And then see impact of their work. So this is common, that they want to see kind of the fruits of their labor, so to speak. That's right up our alley, for farming. Of course, we get to see our impact. But you're seeing, people don't want to be a number anymore. There's a big movement from a big company to a small company. And so what we're seeing is individuals not wanting to work for a large corporation. They specifically want to work for a small to mid-sized company, and they want to be involved with the owners. They want to be involved more with those decisions and being part of the big picture. And so there's a big drive moving back to, the small to mid-sized businesses, which is, again, good for us, but how do we position that? And then work-life balance. So I say work-life balance, and then I probably should pause, because there could be a couple eye rolling or just that word together. And first of all, we get it. We have, we store potatoes, we ship potatoes, we're busy pretty much year round, and we still struggle with it. But work-life balance is different for everyone. Not everybody, that doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. But thinking about how can we build that work-life balance for candidates. Now, busy season, I'm not saying gloves are off, because we have to get the crop out, right? So that's one thing. But could we, include some more part-timers or some individuals that work a 40-hour work week that would love, to kind of help out on the farm just in the evenings, to reduce that burden just a little bit for your full-time employees. So I'm not saying we're going to get perfect. We're never going to be a 8 to 5 kind of deal. But a lot of, you think a lot of other industries are also not 8 to 5. You think of nurses or, doctors, or, they're on crazy shifts, or cops are on crazy shifts, or industrial, during peak season, during their cycle, certain in the season for whatever they're selling, they have these big swings of uptick in increase of hours. We're not the only kind of industry that has these crazy hours and kind of demands that change by the season. So just thinking about then, what do we do about it? How do we minimize that while still ensuring the farm is covered? So I think, employees aren't necessarily looking for a straight, 40-hour work week, but a little bit more structure, a little bit more, not 7 days a week, all out all the time. And so how do we do that while still getting the crop out? So can we do more rotations? Can we get some part-time help? Can we somehow alleviate that, or structure more time off in the winter, or structured time in the winter to make that balance kind of feel right for their family? So doesn't have to be a 9 to 5, but how do we actually balance that and it works for both sides? So we think about, what does ag have to offer? So here's where I think, agriculture kind of thinks, oh, gosh, we've got long hours and, oh, you got to work outside. And I really think we need to switch that into your selling point. You look at a lot of large HR corporations or large corporations with their HR teams, they have now like a marketer, like in HR, to market their jobs. So we're not, we might not be perfect at that in ag, but we can really showcase that we are that small to mid-sized business, and we do care about your family, and you do really get to be close to your team and get to see the impact of your work. There's a big movement, it's been happening for several years now, where employees want to be part of something bigger. And like, what is bigger than growing the food that we need to survive, right? So, agriculture has the one industry that is just beyond critical and very impactful for the world. So when COVID hit, I had more individuals call me outside of ag wanting to be part of ag. One, because they've been attracted to it, but two, they also looked at it as a stable industry. We always need food. And so we can offer that stability, that you're, not going to be downsized. You're not going to sell out your farm. And so they've got more stability than other places offer. And actually, people do enjoy working outdoors. I know we've got heat and cold, and I'm looking out the window and we've got like 10 inches of snow on the ground. So I get that, it's cold, hot, wet, everything else for outdoor jobs, but people enjoy it. I think that's, again, a perk. We often think industrial employees wouldn't want to work on a farm, but actually in talking to a lot of maintenance managers and mechanics, they're tired of being inside of the same four big walls every day. So you actually have a one-up on some of those positions where they go to the same building every day, and it just gets monotonous. So you have variety in your work. You have the seasons, so that's actually to your advantage to sell that you have the seasons. And obviously they can see the impact of their work, so they can do that. So we talk about not only pulling from agriculture, but pulling people outside of agriculture to our openings. These are some big selling points that we want to make sure that we're really showcasing for our industry as a whole. So, okay, so now we know what they're looking for, right? So how do we find them? So where are they? How am I searching versus how are they searching? So if we know what they want, so we've got to get better at, getting our perception right for what we're trying to kind of our value proposition, like our differentiation for our farm. Once we have that, where do we go to find talent? So this is a first ever, so we will try this, but I would love to know, by using your chat box on your Zoom, as Kate kind of talked about, you might have to tap on your screen, or it could be at the bottom. I would love to know how you're currently searching for employees today. I would love to know kind of where you're searching, what are you using today? And if you want to put if it's working or not, that's great, but you don't have to as well.
All right, Lori, they're coming in, and I've got some that are using word of mouth and just talking Craigslist. Word of mouth is coming from a lot. Indeed, Facebook posts, they're using Facebook and other social media.
Perfect.
Word of mouth, person to person, asking other farm employees for recommendations.
Yep.
Facebook.
Nice.
Yeah, more word of mouth, Craigslist.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate all those answers. I was hoping they were going to come in, and I wasn't sure how that played out. So I would love to know more about that. So I'm excited. A few of you guys said social media, because we're going to talk about that actually in the next slide as that being a really big tool. So it's interesting if you look at the chart here, you know, how you're looking. This is off of a survey we did a couple years ago, and it was word of mouth, employer referrals, and walk-ins was the top 3 choices at that time. And so, you know, that's how we've been looking. I would argue, I'm going to guess that you're still too short sometimes on enough people to talk to for you to be selective. So word of mouth, you know, you should still use word of mouth, right? And employer referrals, and integrate that into your search. But at the same time, I always worry, is that candidate pool, is that going to be too small of a pool, right? Can we be selective if we have one person in front of us or 2 people in front of us? And that would be a concern. You know, how can we make sure we're having the best, and we're not settling if the pool of candidates is just too small? So we look at, okay, so let's flip that. How are candidates looking, right? So if you look at the data, candidates that are actively looking for jobs are on company websites, online job sites. So online job sites would be, you know, sites like AgHires, of course, right, for agriculture. But also there's generic job boards like the Indeed. I'm sure you've seen commercials on for it. There can be a lot of resumes you don't want to see that come through Indeed, but it does get you that kind of broad spectrum. And we do kind of recast our jobs as well to those other generic sites for some additional exposure on certain jobs. And so you have online job sites, professional network sites such as LinkedIn, if they're a little bit more senior level. But we're also seeing, you know, mechanics and service managers and things like that on LinkedIn as well. So social media is really important. So even on our own job board, you know, for AgHires, we have lots of traffic per month. I think we have about 55 to 60,000 unique visitors to AgHires looking for jobs. So we have a ton of traffic, but we still believe that social media is also key to help get after some passive candidates that are not actively looking. So we have a product, and I'm not trying to sell you on it, but we have a product just to use targeted social media ads to get in front of people within a certain mile radius of that farm, in addition to their posting on AgHires, because we know that's a great way to get, you know, passive candidates that aren't looking. Maybe their wife sees it, maybe their cousin sees it, you know, someone sees it, you know, or they see it and they want to apply. So it's a great way to showcase your openings. Also, if you have your own Facebook page and you're starting to build that community awareness, you could get, you know, I've seen people hire people that way by just having more presence online. I have to tell you, when we're passively reaching out to candidates or we're advertising for job roles, the very first thing a candidate does after being reached out to or after looking at a job posting is they will go try to Google you, right? So they're going to go try to find your website. They're going to try to find your Facebook page. It says 64% research the company. That's a couple years old. My guess is it's much higher than that now. I rarely talk to a candidate that hasn't already dug into the business. What happens though if you do not have a farm website or you do not have a farm social media page? 40%, almost 40% will not apply to your position. That's a huge chunk of people that are not going to actually apply if they don't know you. So they want to get to know you a little bit. And I think, you know, if you don't have a website, you know, like, oh, how do I do one of those? They've made it really easy. So if I guarantee if you ask, you know, people within your family or within the company, even your employees, you know, someone should be able to, you know, use some of those templates online to help build a very basic website. So just including things like, who are you and what's your family history and what do you guys grow there? And, you know, who do you sell to, or all that. Maybe have a land manager page if you rent ground. Maybe you want to talk about how you rent ground. So it doesn't have to be a huge website, but it could just be a simple 3-page website. Again, pretty simple with the tools and templates that are available online. And that should increase your candidates that apply to your posting significantly. So, again, I would say at a very minimum, have a Facebook page, use your Facebook page, post pictures about your harvest, post pictures about what's going on with planting, get that community involved, and that will also increase your exposure. It's almost like a word of mouth, but cutting edge, word of mouth maximizing technology. So you think about the perfect job posting. So, and if you're working with us, we help our clients write these. But if you're working on a perfect job posting for yourself to use, I think they say about 3/4 of candidates are frustrated with lack of info. I would say so. The number one issue with most job postings we see come through is just lack of info. So we will sometimes get like a 3 to 4 sentence job posting. So it'll say something like farmhand, aspects of the farm, I'm just making this up, like, high hours, during peak season, or we're looking for an assistant herdsman, and, you're going to do like AI, and you're going to do, tours per day and what have you. And then that's it. It's like a couple of sentences. So they know nothing about you. They know nothing about your farm. They don't know anything about roughly the schedule or what it's like to work there, or, does it include benefits or not benefits or what have you. So I think just making sure that you're answering these questions, like, who are you? Why your company? Why this role? Goes back to, again, talking about that marketing piece. So, how do we market ourselves? And we do need to increase that. One of the areas we see, so a lot of times we're lacking information. Sometimes we can get too much information, right? We can have really long qualification lists, and a great candidate will very much take that qualification list seriously. So if you say 5 years of farming, but you actually don't care if they have as much farming, they might not apply because you put 5 years of farming. So I would say the qualification should definitely be the qualifications. Just make sure, they're not too stringent. Remember, this posting is our first kind of hello to you. So you're leaving an impression, kind of either way. So if it's too short and really vague, my guess is that they're not going to take it as serious, and they're going to think, oh, well, maybe that's how they communicate. Not very clear, kind of not, too vague. If you have it too stringent, I've had some job postings, I feel like it's I don't know, like they're yelling at the poor candidate, like, you will do this, you must do this, you will do this. Like, that's a little intimidating. Not that you shouldn't expect, certain things, but at the same time, if it's a laundry list of must complete, you have to do this, we don't tolerate this. If it's kind of a threat throughout the whole job posting, then you've pretty much deterred candidates that way. So you just have to think about, just as if you're greeting somebody for the first time, what is that impression that you are leaving using the job posting? The last little tip I'll kind of give you is really making sure, and this is where we help our clients a lot, is kind of maximizing keyword choices. How is a candidate looking? How would they be searching for a job, and how might I miss them? If you put, let's say, assistant herdsman, and you only had a couple of sentences in there, and you never use the word livestock or dairy, and someone was looking for dairy jobs, they would literally never find you. So, we help our clients out with a lot of that, but just thinking about, again, that perspective that you're leaving, and also kind of that clarity of your role. And compensation, if you can put the compensation on, great. And if you can't, because you don't want your other employees to see, or you're just not really sure of where you want the compensation to be, you can leave it off. And if you have benefits, of course, you'd want to talk about that as well. So attracting the best candidates, I think where we see some hiccups, right, with hiring is just really making sure that candidate is having a good experience. Um, make sure that the process is fast enough. I want you to be thorough. We'll talk about how many interviews you should conduct with each candidate. But at the same time, you don't want to leave candidates hanging for a month at a time and then all of a sudden pick up the phone and think they're still available. A very good candidate is off the market typically 2 weeks or less. So it's a very short window. And we see clients lose great candidates all the time. And it is 99% due to the lack of a fast enough process. Again, you don't have to make a hiring decision within 2 weeks, but the process needs to keep moving along so that we don't lose them to another opportunity. And we have a client right now that, gosh, it's, some of these candidates have been hanging out for 6-7 weeks. And so we're losing them left and right out of the candidate pool, especially the good ones, right? So, and then making sure, we're being transparent about what's great about the farm, what you're still working on, what's not great. I think just being transparent about all that's involved is really critical. Of course, market your farm, which we talked about. And then, having a competitive package. So, I probably should get like a t-shirt, a t-shirt that says, don't offer a salary or wage that is lower than what they currently make. So I get that you want them to kind of prove their worth, I hear that probably the most often on farms, like, well, I can't start them off too high. I'll increase if they're great. I just think you're not going to attract the best with that mentality. And so I get where the mentality has come from, but at the same time, comp has significantly increased across agriculture. And so if you're going to offer low, you're not going to get them. And if they have to take a step backwards, most likely you're not going to get them to join the team. And so I'd rather actually have you pay as if you believe they're going to be a top performer and pay as competitively as you can. But the strategy should be that you kind of move quickly on a termination if it's not a fit. I'd rather see that than to kind of be underpayers in hopes that you kind of pay higher later. I don't think I have a compensation slide in this presentation, but the $15, $16 hour tractor operator is now like 19 or 20 plus, and it's really hard for me to get excited these days pretty much about anyone that has, what would you call, like a hands-on kind of lead or field lead, anyone at that kind of caliber that kind of thinks a few steps ahead is really a highly impactful employee. It's very difficult to get that 25, 24 or less. So, again, that's really broad, right? We recruit across the whole US. So if you have questions, you can contact me afterwards about kind of your area. But, the rule of thumb is, compensation has significantly increased the past 4 to 5 years across the board. One of our John Deere dealerships has increased pay 2 times in the past 2 years across all their stores for all their technicians because the pay is that competitive. So again, I won't get into that too much, but if we're going to attract the best, we do need to really think about what is the market that we're in and where do we need to be in terms of compensation to attract that person. So unique candidates, since we are short, right? So where are we going to pull from? So obviously wish list, right, is from agriculture. We can target other industries. We'll talk about that in a second. Retirees are a great resource. I mean, retirees are some of my favorites, right? They're not going to work like an 80-hour work week, but they're great to add on to your peak season. And depending on where they're at in their retirement, they might be with your team for 5, 6, 7 years during those early retirement years. And they're just a great add-on. They really care about the equipment. They care about what they're doing. So I love to hire retirees. Contract or freelancers, you think about your accounting or your marketing or maybe improving a technology or an app to better communicate, using like a freelance or contract to kind of supplement, to kind of elevate your farm's performance is a great way. Or we talked about this part-time, split roles, things like that. We've had success where someone, let's say, is working for an industrial manufacturer, and let's say they work from 7 to 3 every day, when they would love some supplemental income. How can we find some of those candidates to help kind of, do some of those evening shifts, or maybe kind of that frees up your full-time employees just a little bit. So thinking about, not every position has to be full-time or seasonal, seasonal full-time. It could be pieced together. Hiring outside of ag. So we hire outside of ag for our own family farm. So obviously I'm a big proponent of this. My husband is military, so he knew my dad, long story short, prior. And when he came back out of the military, they hired him on the farm, and he quickly excelled that way. And we've hired other military on the farm. So if they're mechanically inclined and they have that leadership, maybe they were at E6 or higher and they've got some, good management or leadership, that's also great. Again, E4s are, good as well to start. Engineers, we have a potato farm, not ours, that they look to hire engineers. So they love the thought process, they love the continuous improvement aspect, and they look to add those engineers to their team. So I think engineers actually are a great add, especially if you're looking for an ops manager or a maintenance manager of that type. And we kind of talked about this earlier. I think a lot of times farms dismiss manufacturing and industrial because we just think they have a too structure of hours, or they're just not used to it. And I'm not saying they're all going to be a great fit for ag, but I am saying I have found several people that are great fits for ag, where they maybe grew up in ag, or they just grew up more working on their hands, and they're phenomenal at what they do, but they're just tired of being indoors. They don't want to be a number. They want to see variety of their work. They want to see the impact. Here we go again. This is what agriculture has to offer. So think about that when you're advertising. Typically our farm clients say farming background's necessary. I'm going to encourage you to think about, is that really the case? I mean, if we got you a heavy equipment mechanic from the military that is great to work with, couldn't they kind of pick up the ag side fairly easily? So something to think about as you're advertising and posting and looking at candidates. I have this on here, and so I'm going to be laughing, and I can't see you, so I have no idea if you guys have seen these commercials or not. But there's a whole, like, Dr. Rick, he's, with Progressive. I think it's Progressive. I should know, Progressive Insurance. And he says, like, don't be your parents, right? So he kind of walks through like all these commercials. There's several, I think, at the Super Bowl, of kind of what not to do, what your parents do, right? And so I had a laugh. So I said, don't interview like your parents, because I know this because I've seen my parents interview. I've seen farmers interview. I've seen my brother interview, and we don't want to quite interview like that anymore. I have seen, farmers snoop into the car, maybe not open the door, but let's just say you're peeking in the truck, to see if it's clean, or we're asking them what their spouse does for a living, or do they go to church, or do they, who knows what you're asking, but some illegal questions. So I think about, interviews have changed. It's not so much like an interrogation anymore. I have to say that, the old school thought process was like, hey, I'm giving them a job, like, with money, so I don't have to impress them. With the short market, everyone's giving them a job with good paying money. So, now we have to kind of not treat this like as interrogation, maybe more like a first date, but think about the fact that that first interview, we're just trying to get to know each other. we're just trying to figure out what their background is, what their skills are, and can you tolerate being next to them for a little bit of time. And then if that's the case, then we bring them back for a second interview and a third interview, and we bring other people in on it and we take a deeper dive, right? But I do joke that we have to kind of up our game with interviews. So another little chat, I'm gonna ask first, this is my other one besides the questions at the end. What is your favorite interview question? I'm gonna go over a couple of my key interview questions, but I would love to know, what are you asking when people are on your farm? What's some of your favorites that you feel like gets after their background?
All right, they're starting. We've got a couple that are coming in.
Okay.
So one person said they want to know, what do you want to be doing in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
And we've got another lady who has asked, why do you want to work here?
Yep.
Where do you come from, or are you from around here?
Yep.
What is your vision of the work schedule on a farm? Are you willing to work the hours?
Yeah, sure.
And it looks like that might be all I have.
Okay.
Lori.
Perfect. I like some of those. Those are good ones. I like the kind of why you want to work here. I think it is important to know what does interest them about your opportunity, and you'll get a lot from that. If it's they just want a job, they just need something in between, or they actually really want to work for you. And I have not hired people before if I didn't think they really wanted to work here, because I do think we have a lot to offer. And if they're really not that excited right off the bat, I don't know how that becomes more exciting. So I do look for that. That's a great question. The 5-year question is a great question. It depends on the role, how much I weigh that answer. So, if they're like, let's say, operator mechanic, and you ask them what they want to do in 5 years, I think it's important to ask. I wouldn't overweigh it if they don't have this phenomenal answer, because sometimes at that level, that might be the role that they're going to stay in for a long time, and sometimes I always think, well, doesn't everybody want to move up the ladder like I did, but it's not necessarily everyone's kind of, initiative, I guess, to do, but that's okay. So I just think the 5-year plan, take it a little bit lighter if it's a little lower level, and then obviously higher impact of the answer if it's a little bit higher level. So some favorite questions. I'm often, I didn't put on the typical, like, what can they do mechanically? What have they operated, things like that. Who have they managed? How do they manage? So these are all, I think, that can be done at almost any level. But it gets after, what are they passionate about? Kind of what do they like to do? What are they great at? So what's been your favorite and least favorite roles, and why? I like to know that, because I have very much found out a lot about if I think they're going to fit, depending on how they answer that question. Because, I've had even recruiters, right? If their favorite role is being out and about in a sales position in agriculture, and our recruiters are 95% of the time behind a desk and on a phone, they're not going to enjoy this job, right? So they might think our job is great, but if they love kind of driving and visiting farms, like we don't offer that. We recruit across the whole US. So their answer helps me to help them if they're a good fit. Excuse me. Reasons for leaving one organization and moving to another. So you probably already asked this question, right? Like, why'd you move? Why were you kind of inspired to kind of make a change? Often we get the surface answer and we don't do enough digging. So, I'll have things like, well, I just didn't see eye to eye with management, it wasn't a fit. And then they just move on. Great. Well, can you help me understand that? Like, what was it like? What was it that you didn't care for? Or, what would you have done differently? Try to dig a little deeper without, putting them too much in the hot seat, but you kind of want to just conversationally ask them a little bit more, right? And really kind of dig at those answers. Number 3, if you could change anything about the last company you worked for, what would it be? I'm curious, this is a great question. I'm curious if what their thought process is, right? I'm trying to think if they're a thinker, obviously there's always something to change. So I would love to know what would they change? What would their, and if they complain the whole time, well, that's an indication too, right? If they have 10 minutes of a complaint about the company with nothing positive to say, that would be a flag to me. And then what are you naturally great at? I love that question. There's an individual I interviewed and I said, he's like an agronomy manager for a small ag retailer. I said, what are you great at? He's like, I don't know how to say this, but I'm just really great at like coordinating the show, I think is what he said. I know like what to do, 10 steps ahead. I know this person's coming back from here and he should be over, this person could go here and it all fit together efficiently. So he's like, I'm really good at like putting all those pieces together. His answer wasn't the smoothest answer, right? But it was the right answer. We were actually looking for just that kind of problem solver. So I think if you can get them to talk about what they're naturally great at, it's usually a really good indicator of they know themselves actually. So why don't we should just ask. If you ask your coworkers what's like to work with you, what would they say? This question, you're gonna steal one of my favorite questions if you use number 5, but it really does throw people off. They have a hard time lying with this question because they have to think about that for a second. And it tells a lot about the person with what their answer is there. I didn't have it on the slides, but just a few other tips with you interviewing because, we only have so much time today, but it's to make sure that we're doing a walking tour. So you can come back to the office or the house or whatever to do your full interview. But I would love to do kind of a tour of the farm and really kind of see, what questions they ask on the tour, what the interaction starts to look like, what questions they have for you. If there's other employees on your farm, did they say hi? What was that interaction like with other farm members? And of course, again, for lack of time, I didn't go over it, but just knowing what is legal and illegal to be asking. I've seen just so many not legal questions. So there's just it's a shorter list, just to be careful with when we're interviewing. So screening do's and don'ts, really just not to overread the resume. So we're trained as recruiters that we talk to a lot of people than less, because not everyone's a great resume writer. I have literally had some phenomenal mechanics have like a 3-sentence resume, like just not the best resume, but I really don't care. If they're really good with equipment and they fit our culture, they can have a bad resume. So just remember, it's not everyone's forte to have a great resume. Now, an executive, I expect them to have a great resume. And if they don't, I kind of hold them to it, that would maybe knock them out. But depending on, what roles we're looking at, really determine what does that resume look like. We just hired someone for one of our dealerships and his resume was not so great, but his interview was awesome. And even the client said, wow, this interview or this resume is like not so great. I said, I know, but he's really great on the phone. And sure enough, they hired him. So one thing we see most farms do is actually overread, the resume. Of course, preparing for the interview and digging deeper. We talked about those kind of follow-on questions. If your gut is saying something's wrong or there's not enough info, then go for it and ask them more. I always think multiple interviewers are better. So you don't want to have like a 5-on-1 interviewers versus interviewee. But, having that second interview, bringing another person in on it, going to lunch, I guess if your state or county right now allows that, and, spending some time, back on the farm or meeting with other key people within your organization. So multiple interviewers. And then I always say 3 interviews, which sounds like a lot, but I often see a farm do one and done kind of interview. And that's, that's very risky. It's very costly to not have the right hire at the right time. And so just spending a little bit more time on that process will really help you miss people. If you leave that first interview really excited, I am super happy for you. The second interview, you're either going to be just as excited or you're going to tell me you avoided a train wreck. And it's really one or the other. So at a minimum, promise me you'll do 2, but encourage it is 3. And if you feel like you've already talked about everything, then again, maybe you go to lunch, maybe go drive and show them some of the fields or what have you, or be creative with that last interaction. But the more interaction, the better, because their personality is really going to come out for you. A quick common mistakes, but I feel like we covered some of this. Too quick and settled. Sometimes we're just in a big hurry, or too few of candidates to choose from. And then this third one is interesting. I see farms do this. They kind of dismiss their own gut. So I had a farm that I was working with, and we were walking around with the candidate, and it was a dairy farm. Actually, we're walking around, and his resume looked great, but he kind of moved like a turtle, right? He just didn't move fast. He actually didn't respond fast, to questions. He just, and his resume and background like screamed right, he's qualified. And I remember the farmer saying, gosh, I don't, I didn't care for some of the stuff, but he's got such a great resume. How do you pass that up? And I told him to pass. Like, you're not going to make him like move faster when he's hired. That is going to be his pace, and he's at an interview, so that's the fastest he will go probably. And at the same time, you have to work with this person every day. So some people think it's their gut. I don't know if it's necessarily your gut, but farmers have, we interact with a lot of different people throughout our lives. So that gut has just been built up kind of knowledge that you've had over the years about kind of human interactions. So, you don't want to just hire someone because you had a great conversation and you really don't think they could do the job, but they're a great person. So we want to be careful of that, but also don't dismiss your own gut when you feel like something's just not going to be a fit. And I think we've all hired that way, and we dismiss the gut and then we regret it later. So, and then the compensation we talked about, making sure we're being competitive. Before I move on to retaining and kind of maximizing performance here, Kate, do we want to answer any questions that we have now before we move to the last section here?
You bet. I have got a few good questions that came in that I think it'd be great to address. Okay. Number one, kind of back on what you were talking about here just a second ago, how can you really tell if someone is going to be a hard worker once they're hired? And the same thing, how do we know if they're going to work the hours that we need?
Yeah. So it's a question I get a lot, actually, right? Like, how do we know they're a hard worker, right? So I think 2 things: spending a lot of time with them is really critical. And I think people have lost the reference checking aspect. We get a lot of really good information off of reference checking. And so I'm not saying like, I don't know, I'm not just having a couple blanket questions like, hey, how'd you work with them? Did they work out? I'm asking questions like, hey, what's kind of their pace that they work at? Who do they work best with? How can I set them best up for success? What are they great at? What are they not so great at? If you ask, references those questions, they really do give you answers. And we've definitely dodged the bullet on plenty of people by doing reference checks. I think that they've kind of gone by the wayside. I don't know what happened to reference checks, but I still think they're valuable. I also think a couple of things: finding out what kind of schedule and hours they worked before. I'm often asking that question to candidates. So what has been your hours? About how many hours have you worked? Have you ever worked a 70-hour work week? What did that feel like to you? And then being realistic about what your hours are and kind of walking through that. So we try not to sugarcoat it. Winter's 40, 45, springtime definitely peaks up to 60. And there's a 6-week period that's very, very, very ugly between storage and out of field harvest at the same time. It's just a lot of hours. So I think just being realistic with what that is, have they done it before, and what that's mapped out to be. Another thing you have to be careful on, again, making sure we're legal, but I have seen farms invite the spouse out to the farm. So if you are still concerned, we actually invite the spouse to lunch and walk them through together, again, what the seasons look like, what the job looks like, what the family farm atmosphere looks like. And we've included them in the process just to make sure we're all together and on board with those hours.
Thank you. And Lori, I've got one more that I think
Yeah.
will make sense to address now. This is, I think, getting at the angle of measuring that employee compensation. This particular person said some employees get compensation outside of monetary, like use of machinery.
Yep.
And that is hard to measure and hard to value. Would it be easier to just charge employees for that and then maybe increase pay or something along those lines? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I think you can handle it one of two ways. So that's an excellent question. One is you could start kind of charging for it. And I think that especially affects if like one employee is using it like much more than another, right? Or if it feels a little off balance. Sometimes it's easier to set even the playing field and charge for that, and then you could increase pay. Another way is, and I don't have it on this presentation, but I like to see at the year end a kind of total compensation, and I'm lacking for the word right now. It's almost like a total compensation summary that you give employees. And I've seen it, become quite large. So you might put in, here's your compensation, roughly here's maybe your gas, let's say if you use on the farm fuel, or your truck value, if you have an on-farm truck or not, your insurance value for that truck, or if you give them a side of beef, whatever that value might be, and they kind of put together a summary, and we just give it to all the employees, so it's not like, hey, do you see what you're getting? It's more of, here, just want to make sure everyone's we're on the same page with kind of what the total comp package looks like here. And, or if there's housing or not housing, what's the value of that, and kind of add up. And I think employees are surprised maybe by what that final dollar figure is. And again, it's really just making sure we're showcasing they're fully understanding kind of all what we're getting, so that if they do have another opportunity, they can really say, wow, my total comp is really closer to this if I were to leave this position and go to somewhere else. So I'd like to see a good total comp summary kind of capturing all that. But that's a great question. So retaining and maximizing. I'm going to take a drink of water and let you guys just pause on this, because whenever I say the word training and farmers together, it often looks something like this, and if you ask me, even on my own team, what do I struggle with the most? It's training. I have to work really hard at it. It doesn't come natural. I think it has to be something to do with us being farmers. I'm not really sure what the problem is, or if we just all grew up like, hey, figure it out mentality. So I can't even point the finger if you struggle in this area, because it's one I have to focus on for myself pretty hard. So you think about, we'll start with retention first. Really thinking about, again, how do we keep employees, right? How do we make sure that they don't jump ship on us? I feel like I've said it a lot. Culture is going to just jump right back at number one. So, I always ask people, okay, what spurred you from moving from one job to another? And do you know, like, it's either the culture, their manager, it's not, they're not really saying I left for money occasionally, but that's really not the number one reason for movement. So, and having clear targets, we think in farms that targets are, I won't say optional, but hey, we can't control the weather, we can't control this, but every business has things they can't fully control. So what are those targets? Employees want to hit a target, right? At the end of the day, our human nature like wants to win, right? So if you don't give us a target, then it's hard for us to feel like we fully succeeded for you. We might feel like we did a good job, but we feel like we didn't kind of cross the finish line for you and for the company. So thinking about kind of clear targets, collaboration amongst the team. I cannot even believe, but think about employee t-shirts. I know that sounds silly, but there's just a lot of camaraderie when people are wearing your company t-shirts with your company logo. It's nice. They have something to wear to work. It looks nice because all the employees are kind of dressed similar, and it really does bring kind of a team atmosphere. Think about sports teams and things like that, and there is something to it. But how else can you collaborate both at work or maybe outside of work, volunteering, things like that? Reverse performance reviews. So we don't have time to go over performance reviews. I would love to see twice a year performance reviews on the farm. One maybe a little bit more informal, one a little bit more formal. But asking really the reverse performance review is, what can we do better as a company? So it goes back to that culture. What else can we do, really for you in terms of even communication? Doesn't have to be perks. It could just be even, what else do you need from your management team to lead? How else can we help you grow professionally and personally? And what does that look like? So, that's not always about what can I give to you. It's more like, how can I help you grow and how can I help you succeed in your role? And then obviously offering impactful benefits. I do get this question a lot on benefits, and it does depend on the farm, but we are seeing a lot of small businesses give benefits. And so you're kind of up against that a little bit. And if you don't have benefits, then, is there a stipend or something to help pay for those benefits? You think about why people leave. A lot of people think it's money, but it's not. It's usually, again, that culture. A lot of it is their manager. And you think about retaining, not just retaining employees, but increasing performance. So a lot of people talk about employee engagement. And employee engagement, people think, oh, you're just there to make your employees happy. And I just, that's definitely not employee engagement. Employee engagement is how much people are passionate about their job that they're in, how committed they are to the company, and how much kind of additional kind of discretionary effort do they give your organization. So it's not about being happy, but how are they engaged, passionate, and committed, and they're going above and beyond kind of your average team member. So if you said, like, what's one area you'd focus on, it would be employee engagement. How engaged are they to the success of the organization? And some of that comes from a few of these. I'm going to watch my time here a little bit, but really, a sense of purpose. Help me understand kind of those targets again. Give me the why behind something. They want to be there to help. There's a whole book on ideas. Ideas are free, right? Employees have great ideas. So, how do we kind of maximize those ideas? How do we run with them? How do we help them run with that idea if it's a good idea? If it's even just an okay idea, let's say their idea you feel probably wouldn't hurt anything. I don't know if it's going to help something. I would still let the employee go for it. Because if they use that idea and you kind of let them run with it, I guarantee you will get 10, 20 more plus ideas, right? So ideas are free, and you're not always going to run with every idea, because you might say, hey, we've tried that before. It's a great idea. I appreciate that input, but we're not going to go with that idea. This is why, but keep them coming, so just kind of fostering that kind of sense of becoming part of the team and kind of fostering that kind of thinker that you want. Thinkers. Everyone always says, I say, who do you want to hire? Thinkers. That is that not what we always say as farmers, right? I want someone who's going to think. So let them think and kind of bring in those ideas. Belonging to a team, that culture of trust. there's a reason there's so many books on trust in the company, because once that trust is down, that is when disgruntled employees happen, right? If they can't trust the relationship, either trust what you say, trust that you're not going to lose your temper, trust of just across the organization, trust between two owners. I think that kind of culture of trust really has to be one of the key ingredients if we're going to increase that culture, increase that performance. But yeah, having some fun, having some fun competition with the group, volunteering together. Again, these are not kind of rocket science type things, but they do take a focus. We talk about that preventative maintenance on equipment. This is kind of your preventative maintenance. Like, how do we kind of keep building on some of these practices over time? A little bit more on this kind of maximizing performance, but it's really, feedback in the moment. Farmers, even myself, it doesn't come natural to give feedback. So how do we give feedback in the moment? Hey, that was great. I would like to see maybe this next time, but this was great, or that was perfect. I want to see more of it, whether that's a positive, whether that's kind of a correction or redirection. But if you have those all the time, you won't have to have a kind of big talk at the performance review time. It should just be, they should already know. And what's interesting is if you start to do performance reviews, you will find your employees are typically much harder on themselves than you are. I am surprised every time we do performance reviews on our team, and so is my brother. Like, they are harder. The employees are much harder on themselves than you are, and they actually already know their own flaws. So if you have them reflect first on their performance, your job is going to be pretty easy, because you're going to say, what, I'm so glad you said that. I have noticed that as well, that you're kind of struggling in this area. How do we help get you there? So have them reflect first on the performance review. Have them analyze themselves, then bring it to you and come back together. And you will find they already know their flaws. I mean, most of us are kind of grown adults, and we don't like to talk about it, but we kind of all know it's there. So I think a very basic performance review is very effective. Grow and learn. That is another question we get a lot from candidates, is do they give training opportunities outside of the farm, or how else could I grow? And not everyone's looking to be an owner someday necessarily, but people like to grow and learn. So, could they attend this virtual, seminar today, or another one that FCS, puts on, or can they go to the DTN Progressive Farmer Conference, or, can they take a supervisory class or something like that? So think about kind of what opportunities to help them kind of grow and learn, what that looks like. And of course, appreciation, right? Team celebrations, the thank yous. My husband I don't think my husband's ever done a handwritten thank you note, but he does say appreciate it pretty much after every phone call with his team member. So thanks, appreciate it. Like, I don't know if he uses the A in it, appreciate it. I think it's just appreciate it. So, but they know it's coming, and they know that he's going to say it, and, kind of talk them either way of kind of where it is. We always appreciate their time, their effort. And it, believe it or not, goes a long way. I'm going to switch a little bit to onboarding. So onboarding is a fancy HR word, right? Of what do they do when they get to your company? So if you have a really good onboarding practice, as you see here, the likelihood of them staying 3 years is 70%, and their productivity is much higher. But what we see is often a bad onboarding, and the turnover is extremely high within those first 90 days. So I'm not thinking of onboarding as like what you do with big corporations, where you sit them down, you go through the company policy, you go through compliance. I'm talking about onboarding in a sense of how do you integrate them into the team? So that's one aspect, like the human aspect. And then how do you get them trained up for the job that they're going to be doing? And I think a lot of times on farms, we just don't have a lot of structure to this. And we all know why. It's time consuming, right? It's time consuming to do. It's time consuming to build the onboarding process. And I think one way to handle it, if you don't have a good one now, is just start somewhere. So your very next hire, you're going to start to kind of map out just a Word document of everything you want to share with them about anything, the basics, like how you track your time, this or that, but kind of how we communicate. We prefer text messages. I prefer a phone call. I prefer this. How do you prefer to communicate? And then keep building on this. So your next hire, start mapping out all that you want to share, and then start mapping out training, right? Training on that, all the things you want to say. Let's say if they're in a sprayer, that's a big training doc, but all the things you want to share with them on kind of operating that sprayer, what you expect and wins and how to operate and what to watch out for and all those good things, or things like how to handle an accident. If you get an accident on the road, this is what I expect. It really is endless. So I think sometimes it's just overwhelming. And what you just want to do is just start with a Word doc. Your next hire, or even this winter, maybe you could start putting some parameters together, and then your next hire, keep adding to it. And if you have a hire after that, keep adding to that. And before you know it, you're gonna be so happy that you have this document to refer to for future. So yeah, updating those training documents, often, and use outside resources. So, John Deere's got your, precision ag. So do the other players have precision ag, teams that can kind of come out and talk to your employees. I would say utilize the power of YouTube. So if you found some great videos of that planter or that combine, just save that little link and use the power of YouTube for training. We use YouTube all the time on different topics that you want to share with. So use that, and then always do a kind of a 30, 60, 90-day check-in with your new hires. So just put it on the calendar, and then have that check-in with how things are going, what else we can, do for them to support them throughout their time there. And I happen to think that little picture is hilarious because, again, without instruction, right, what can happen? It's some bad things, supposedly. So I'm going to pause there and just see kind of on all that information, which is quite a bit of information for an hour and 15 minutes. But what other questions do you have? This is the opportunity to kind of pick my brain on pretty much any of the topics related to employees and managing and hiring and even termination. So feel free to put that in the question box and we'll kind of go through those together.
Lori, the first one, I think we can knock out of the way really quickly. I've had several requests come in about different templates. So we are going to provide the slides that Lori has given. And they're wondering about specifically, I've had somebody ask about a total compensation summary, if you have a template or an example of that. And then performance review for farms, if you have a template or an example of that. So whatever documents Lori can share with us, we will make those available to all the registered attendees. Give us a couple of days. You will get an email link. It'll have the recording of today's presentation, as well as any documents that we can get from Lori and make available in these slides. So now I've got some other questions that are going to be quite a bit trickier to handle than that one. Okay. One person has asked for some recommendations on handling an employee that works for the neighbor that is a great employee and has got some interest on coming across the fence line to their operation. Do you have any advice on how to handle that?
Oh, that is a tough one. So, and without knowing all the dynamics, this is a challenge. So, and I'll try to keep it short, but I don't feel like I am already. So, if they're kind of have an interest in your farm, I always feel like that for me feels okay. It's not like you wouldn't kind of poach that employee, but if they're looking to come your way and have a genuine interest, my guess is they're probably going to leave that other farm anyways. The history that I know will say if they're interested in kind of moving on, they're interested in coming to you, they're probably gonna leave to go somewhere else. One idea is really talking to the employee about how they feel about talking to their current employer. I've seen people do that. I would say proceed with caution. You would really want that candidate, that employee, you would want 100% of their buy-in that you can talk to their current employer. I have told other clients not to do that, and they'll still call the other employer. And let's say they didn't end up hiring that person, the chance of them being fired is pretty high. So you just want to make sure, if you're going to go the route of like maybe opening that dialogue to your neighbor, that you have 100% buy-in from that employee. And without knowing your kind of relationship and dynamic, with that neighbor, it's a little hard for me to fully answer that. But the one is proceed with high caution unless the employee says it's okay. The other one is saying, hiring them, and then if you're approached, being honest, saying, actually, they were really interested in coming over to our farm, and we kind of didn't call on that individual, but he kind of came to us and just want to let you know, and you could do it after the fact as well. So we have we've had kind of neighboring farms that has happened to, and we purposely don't recruit from their large farm, and they don't really recruit from ours, but at the same time, sometimes they do come to us and they're going to leave anyways. So hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Got quite a few more questions rolling in, so we'll do our best to get through as many of these as we can. One question says, what benefits do you see employees looking for most? And another one that I'll pair up with that is asking about the most common benefits that other farms are offering.
Okay, both good questions. So what candidates are looking for most is typically the health and the dental insurance. Although a 401k or like a simple IRA, which might be easier for farms, is also an option. Simple IRA it operates very similar to a 401k, but it's less cost and a little simpler to implement. And you could still do some matching if you wanted to. And so, but health, dental, and that 401k are the most important. Of course, vacation is in there. I should say that vacation first year, 2 weeks vacation minimum. So we're still seeing like no vacation the first week or 1 week vacation. That is like most of the time vacation is like 2 to 3 weeks. So your vacation package should be a minimum of 2 weeks paid vacation. If let's say you just can't offer the benefits, you're too small, right? Then you could offer a stipend to share a portion of that cost. And typically you're seeing an average, the employer is covering about 70% of the cost for insurance. Could be 60 to 80, but let's just say 70% for an average. So you don't need to cover all of it, but covering a portion of it so that they can get their insurance on their own. It's very easy to get insurance these days. So there's really kind of no reason for them to not be able to get to their insurance, but you can pay for it that way. On farms, we are seeing quite a few of the insurance being added on, especially the last couple of years. We're seeing movement, but still some farms are not. I think if you look at the 10 employees or less, I have to look at a quote. I thought it looked 75% offer insurance across all small businesses, because I'm having a hard time getting a full just farms only. But you're competing against other small businesses. But again, you could do the stipend if you don't have the health insurance, but that's the most common. 401k and an IRA is not as common as a health insurance, but it's becoming more common. And again, they're very, especially a simple IRA, very cheap to implement. And it's a great avenue for your employees. And you can also contribute if you want to do a match. And it's, employees are looking for that retirement, and that's not very costly at the end of the day for you.
Thank you for that. Another challenging question about searching for employees. How do I search for a new employee before we dismiss the current employee without the current employee knowing?
Right. That is a challenge that comes up more than you think. So sometimes that is why, our clients will hire us for recruiting. So we'll recruit, not use a client's name, although we prefer to use the client's name. But you could post confidentially. The challenge is if you're a small town or you're the only farm in that area, then you have to be really careful about maybe posting a nearby town or something closer and then still keeping it confidential. So you would actually leave your name off the posting, and you would, still try to market that position or market your farm without having as much detail. So it does happen, but you have to be kind of, I would say, careful with it in terms of that, or, you can, use a recruiter and have them kind of confidentially look, but we all need to be on the same page with how sensitive, that journey is. But that does happen because we just can't afford to be short. So we get why that kind of is the case sometimes.
Now I've got another one that's a little bit different angle here, looking at some employee engagement. Can you give some examples of team building exercises such as volunteering or friendly competitions that you've seen other farms do? This person added that this is really an outside of the box for their farm culture, but they think it might be something that they can do to focus on work and increase production.
Okay, perfect. So there's a couple ways. I think some fun things is always having an outing or event. So, we have a kind of post-harvest party on site. On my own AgHires team, we actually do a pretty big outing. Usually it's every year of some sort, but usually I'll do a bigger one every other year. There is cost involved. So, just like farms, right? Gotta watch that budget. So we'll do a big outing, like take them all to a sporting event with their spouse or significant other are there. And then we might do a smaller event as well. So, just having even that is some good stuff. You could also do any type of kind of camaraderie amongst a group. So we, think about safety practices. Farms always need to increase safety practices. So you can literally put together a safety committee that does not involve the owners. So you give them a budget, maybe help them out a little bit and put a lead in there and let them kind of thrive with some of their own projects together. So it's team building and productive at the same time. And you would be amazed at how much more committed they are to the process, committed to helping each other out through the process if they have kind of ownership of that. So think about even kind of internal projects that your team can do. And it's not necessarily run by you, which, for farmers, we might be sweating a little bit, giving up that control, but we know safety has to be improved anyway. So think about, how do we bring them in on some of these things? And then even same thing, ask them, what do you guys want to do, for this planting season or this harvest season in terms of a competition or goal in terms of that.
Well, Lori, we are coming up on time, and so I want to thank you on behalf of all of our guests today for making some time for us here in the state of Missouri. You've really challenged us to look in different places for employees and certainly ask different questions when we're not interviewing them once, not twice, but 3 times, and then being more intentional about how we treat them, how we manage them, and what our strategy is for long-term employment growth. So sure appreciate your time today. Lori, we did have a bunch of questions that we were not able to get to today. So I would love to work with you maybe over the next month or so to find a way to get some of those maybe in written format addressed, as well as we're going to make sure that the slides and the recording of the presentation today and some other handouts and resources that Lori has is made available to all of you. So Lori, thanks for joining us. And we'll
thank you.
For everybody else, again, watch your email inbox. You're going to be getting that email here. Give us a couple days to get everything loaded onto a resource page, and then we will get that link to you where you can hop on there and access all of those resources. I am making a note of all of the questions. There was a ton of them that I just did not get to, that we didn't have time, and we will do our best to get answers to those questions addressed in a way that you can access them. If you have more questions that you'd like follow up on, please feel free to email me, the FCS Financial team, the loan officer that you work with, and we will do our best to get you the resources that you need. Now, finally, you've seen some deadlines if you logged in early that I want to make you aware of. March 1st is the scholarship deadline. So for children and grandchildren of FCS financial member owners, that scholarship application is out there on the website at myfcsfinancial.com. That is due on March 1st. April 1st is the Shaping Rural Missouri grant deadline. These are $500 grant applications for any 4-H or FFA chapter in the 102 county territory that we serve. Again, that application is super easy. It's on the website at myfcsfinancial.com. So make sure that your 4-H and FFA chapters are aware of that $500 grant for community service. And then, as you saw on the slide, FCS Financial recently announced that we're returning $30.7 million in patronage to member owners this year from 2020 earnings. So be watching for more information on your patronage checks coming back. Now, the last thing I have to ask of you this morning is that as you log out of this event, a survey link will pop up. That survey is incredibly important. I read those, my entire team reads those, and our leadership reads those. That's how we can make sure that the events we are bringing are impactful and matter to you. So please take 2 to 3 minutes to fill that survey out. We'll greatly appreciate it. Now, enjoy the rest of your week. Stay warm. We do have some warmer temperatures coming. In the meantime, if there is anything that we can do to help you out, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again.